Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson talked about marriage, and it was fascinating because Bill Maher kind of exposed one of the flaws in his thinking when it comes to something like marriage. My name is Marco Arroyo. Welcome to In Between Sundays. I'm glad you are here today. Pray that you are well. Before we get into the video, consider liking the video, commenting your thoughts. Let me know what you think, subscribing to the channel, and supporting the Patreon that I have. The link is in the description below. I just want to be able to make this podcast better, make it easier in so many ways, to be able to provide more value to you. And that's what you get with the Patreon. You'll get a weekly Q&A. You will get priority for video submissions and podcast ideas, and you get the extended version of this video and every other video that I do. It's always going to be a little bit more on Patreon and when it comes to the videos, so you'll get that too. Bill Maher is a famous comedian. He has a famous show, Real Time with Bill Maher, on HBO, but he also has a podcast called Club Random. And recently he had Jordan Peterson on. And if you don't know Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, a big thinker in the world today. A lot of people love him. A lot of people appreciate him. And they both basically have opposite thoughts when it comes to marriage. Now, Bill Maher is basically an extremist when it comes to marriage. He basically says, if you like marriage, cool. But for me, like I can't even exist in a marriage. It's just not possible. He doesn't even have like long-term relationships, like sincere emotional relationships is kind of what he's going to say right now, which is very fascinating. Look at this conversation. Look at how different they are as Jordan Peterson starts to analyze him. Look at how different they are in the way they think about marriage. But Bill Maher is going to say something really surprising.
And then real time over the last 30 years, friendships that just happened organically. I mean, I never push it on anybody.
But a lot of those are long-term friendships.
Long-term.
So why do you think,
So
you don't have to answer this,
it's wonderful to have so many
but
wonderful friends.
why do you think you were so successful in terms of maintaining long-term friendships, but not successful in terms of maintaining
Because I
long-term
don't see it as a
relationships?
success.
Oh,
You're,
right,
see,
but you do see
I know,
having
but
the friends as a...
just the way the question is phrased,
Yeah, okay.
you are not successful at keeping long-term relationships. Yeah, I threw the game, okay, Doc? I didn't want to be successful. I took a dive in the third round. Yeah.
Right, but...
So Jordan Peterson asks him, why are you so good at, he was just saying, I've had friends for 30 years that I met, just organic friendships, never forced or anything like that. We can hang out all the time and it's the best. And so he asks him, he goes from like a psychologist perspective, why do you think you're so good at maintaining those kinds of friendships, but not like sincere emotional relationships with people, like someone that you might be in love with and in a relationship with? And he says, I don't want that. I don't want that. And he sat through the game, which is a funny way to put it. And notice how the conversation progresses.
But it's curious to me that you, but that isn't the case on the friendship front.
But it's so different. Friendships, you don't get tired of the sex. I still love hanging out with Jim Vallely, and we never, ever expect sex. So there's just not that dimension to it that is always hanging over the head like the sword of Damocles over relationships. The clock's always ticking on them for when the passion runs out. And that's the dilemma everybody finds themselves in. Everybody finds themselves in it. It's just how people handle it. Some people cheat, some people leave, some people don't care. Some people just suck it up. You know, everybody has their way of dealing with it. But it's going to happen. Notice
what he said. Basically, every relationship, the passion or the whatever term you want to put in there, he goes, it's doomed to run out. It's doomed to run out, and it's doomed to just get boring, annoying, even loathsome. And he goes, some people cheat and that's how they cope with it. Some people divorce, some people hate each other, some people just suck it up and they just survive in that relationship until they die. But he basically says that's going to happen to every single marriage. That's going to happen to every single relationship. What of you? What of you? And Jordan Peterson is actually going to explore this with him. And again, there's going to be an amazing moment that you see right now.
No one, I mean, and no one who's in a long-term relationship is going to say, oh yeah, 20 years on and we still like attack each other when we walk in the door. It's just, come on.
That's true in my case.
You still attack each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it makes it up.
What a moment. What a moment. I got to watch that back.
It's just, come on.
That's true in my case.
You still attack each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it makes an ugly
We just played
picture.
Stump the Band. You got me.
Sorry, man.
You got me.
Sorry.
You win
Yeah.
dinner at Pepe's.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Wow.
So look at his surprise. And what is he surprised about? He's surprised that there is someone out there, and it just so happens to be the person he's talking to. I mean, he said that a lot of times. It just so happens that today he's talking to someone that is exactly what he says is impossible. His surprise is that there's no way that after 20 years of being with someone that you could love each other at the same level that you did in the beginning, or that you could be as excited about being with one another at the same level as you did in the beginning. Now, again, these words like excitement and all this stuff, there's lots of studies and stuff out there of things like in the beginning of a relationship, there's a lot of passion, but then as the relationship goes on in good relationships, there's more commitment than there is that excitement, because maybe it's not as new, but it is better, and it is more loving and more dedicated and more emotional instead of more physical and things like that. Those are things that people look into and see about relationships. But you notice what he said. He's like, just being happy to be together. He's like, the way you were in the beginning. Jordan Peterson goes, after 20 years, he goes, Bill Maher says, is there any marriage that is like that? No. And he goes, that's my marriage. Me and my wife are still happy to see each other. Think about that for a second. He has convinced himself that after 20 years of being with someone, you are no longer going to be happy to see one another. That's crazy. That is crazy. And it's interesting, too. I haven't been married for 20 years. I've been married for a little bit under half that, you're going on 9 years. If I were to, if in Bill Maher's mind, if not happy to see each other, and this is the beginning of a relationship, this is happy to see one another, it hasn't been trending like this for me in my marriage. I love my wife even more than what I did in the beginning. I'm happy about being with her even more now than I was in the beginning. I don't, when he says stuff like this, I just don't understand where he's not speaking about himself. He's speaking about like my marriage. He's speaking about Jordan Peterson's marriage, and he's saying like all these marriages, there's no one out there that they're just equally happy or more happy. They're less happy. They're all less happy 20 years into it. I don't know what he's talking about. He's not talking about my marriage. That's not true. I love my wife even more. I'm even more happy. I mean, you have any idea? And he doesn't, because he doesn't have children. But like getting home to my wife and my 2 daughters, dude, that's the joy of my life. What are we talking about here?
Wow, that's very impressive. It's
really
better, better man than I.
Let me tell you the story, because so both my wife and I were very sick for a couple of years.
Right.
And she just about died every day for about 8 months. It was really not good. And she handled it with amazing grace, by the way. And at the same time, I was very ill, and we were actually separated like for about 2 years because I was in hospitals here and there.
Sure.
And so I was there with her for the bulk of her illness, and then when she recovered very suddenly and somewhat miraculously, on our 30th wedding anniversary day, by the way, which she told me she was going to do like 3 months previously, which was like, I have no idea what to make of any of that. I got very ill after that, and so we were apart more or less for about 2 years, and we grew apart quite a lot.
Wow.
And when we got back together, when I moved back into the house, we didn't really know what to do with each other because it had been so long, and she had kind of gone her way and I was still very ill. But we had made a habit of dating 2 or 3 times a week. Like we really set aside time to do that.
Each other?
And yes, each other. Yes. An important point, Bill.
He's so dumb.
And so we had practiced that continually.
Wow.
And we really set aside time to do that. And so when we got back together and we didn't really know what to do, we thought, well, we had this dating routine, like maybe we could start that up again. And I tell you, man, that brought us back together right away. And it was better than it was before. And that has continued.
And when you say dating.
Yeah.
So look at that. He basically says, my wife and I, what strengthened his marriage? What made it so that he can, after 20 years, still love her just as much as he did in the beginning, still be as happy about being with her as much as he was in the beginning. What makes that possible? There's basically two things here. One, they went through the fire together. And in a certain sense, they went through the fire individually in their respective health issues. And they in this sense, though they weren't together physically, like in the same place because of their respective health issues, and they were very serious health issues if you look into that. They really thought his wife was going to die, and Jordan Peterson was in rough shape himself as well. But they went through the fire like this, and their marriage survived the fire. And on the other side of that fire, they were even more committed to one another than before, more in love with one another than before. And you know what this is like, even if you haven't been married before. If you have a friend that you have suffered with, a friend that you went through something with, a friend that maybe you experienced something traumatic with, whatever it might be, there's something different about that friendship. There's a new level of knowledge of one another, a new level of understanding that you and that person have. Maybe it's you and your sibling that had that some of the hardship that you went through in your life, it even built your relationship up even more, because now there's this new level of, you really know who I am. You really know who I've been through. You really see me for what I am, for who I am. And that is sometimes a make or break thing in relationships. But for good relationships, that will just skyrocket the level of love and commitment and admiration, appreciation for relationships. It absolutely does. For good relationships like that, when we go into it with the right mindset, that is amazing for these kinds of relationships. But the other thing that helped his marriage was that they didn't lose their desire to love one another and to express that love. They didn't just say, you know what, in the beginning of a relationship, we are so in love with one another, so excited about being together, and then slowly but surely we will allow each other to just evolve into roommates. And that is what happens with some marriages. And that is why there are so many divorces, at least partly why there are so many divorces. And I'm sure that is the caricature, or that is the thing that Bill Maher has seen. And obviously he's a guy that's been like in Hollywood for years. And so he sees this in these celebrity relationships that are often much more superficial than normal people's relationships. And he thinks that that's got to be everyone, because it's got to be like most of the people he knows are in those kinds of marriages. What me and my wife had in our first year of marriage is not going to carry us through our 9th year of marriage. It's not. What's going to carry us through our 9th year of marriage is every single day of that year. What are we doing to express our love, to show and renew our commitment always, every single day of that year? He sounds like he's talking like it's this impossible thing for a relationship to get better over time. That is what is supposed to happen. If you read anything the Bible says about marriage and about loving one another, husbands loving their wives, wives loving their husbands, and the things that we should offer to one another, that is what's supposed to happen. It's supposed to get better. But a voice like this is so dangerous for people to hear sometimes, because people are hearing him and convincing themselves that there's nothing there for them in a relationship. And so therefore they should seek these superficial things like he has. And according to him, it makes him happy. And what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to fall into that example, and they're not going to be happy. It's not good. It's not good at all. And again, he might say, well, it's just for me, it's just my thing. It's just what I think is important. But his idea of what these relationships are is so wrong, and it's going to hurt people who could be blessed by good, godly, loving relationships. I love you. God loves you. And the life that he has for you and for me is a life of love, and a love that gets better over time in the relationships with people that we love too. When God is the center of all these things, and loving one another as ourselves is the center of all these things, it will only get better. It will only get better. I'll see you next time. I love you. Goodbye.